Hey, welcome to A Valiant Effort. I'm Ted, and today we're looking at 5 reliable cars that you can get for under $5,000. The first car we're going to be talking about, number 5 on our list, is actually something I owned. It's the 96 to 99 and 2000 to 2001 Infiniti i30 and Nissan Maxima.
Ah yes, a car near and dear to my heart, the Infiniti i30. From 96 to 99, it's a little bit different from 2000 to 2001, but they essentially run the same motor during those years, and it is the VQ30DE. The only difference is the exterior. There was a facelift. Now, there is a lot of debate about the best of the VQ motors. A lot of people say it's the VQ35 or 37HR, but unfortunately no car that has that motor can be bought for under $5,000. Although it's safe to say that if you buy a car with a VQ, you're probably going to have a pretty reliable powertrain. So for these Maximas and i30s under $5,000, the best powertrain available seems to be the VQ30DE. The 30D is a really great engine and actually makes good power stock. It's 190, 205, and 227, 217 for the 2000 to 2001, the facelift. I personally still own a 200,000 mile example. It's a 98 i30, and I had zero powertrain issues. And really, I think throughout the life of the car, it was my grandmother's, then my brother's. They didn't have any issues either. Obviously, routine maintenance, probably some suspension upgrades. 2 starters failed. I had to replace the coils at around 180. I did plugs, but beyond that, it was pretty much a bulletproof car. And I'll actually show you a video here where I started up for the first time in months at 206,000 miles.
All right.
Alright, starts right up. Booyah.
So the 30DE does have a few minor issues. They do tend to have leaky valve cover gaskets. Mine leaked the entire time I owned the car. But it's really something that anyone could do who's done some kind of minor DIY stuff. Obviously beyond an oil change, but it's pretty simple on those. They also are known to consume some oil, not nearly as much as the 35DE, but I change the oil every 3,000 miles, just like the 2 owners before me, and I really never had any of those issues. Now, as for transmission option, normally I'd say manual would be the most reliable option because it normally is, but these were so quick for their time with the manual that most of them have been beat on, and quite honestly, it's really, really, really hard to find them. I mean, it's pretty much impossible to find an Infiniti with the manual, but even the Nissans, which were definitely more common, they're hard to find. So the autos aren't fun, but they are really solid, and they last a long, long time. Most of them making it 250 or 300,000 miles from the ones that I've seen that have gotten that mileage. Now, normally I would feel fine recommending the i35 or O-Tune-Up Maxima, but they tend to have the same potential issues as the 30DE, just more common and worse, especially at this price range. Now, I would still recommend buying a car with the VQ35DE as they're really phenomenal motors. I mean, the G35 is a great car, the 350Z, but you're not going to be able to get those in this price range. And the ones that you can get with the 35DE in this price range, like the i35 and the O-Tune-Up Maxima, they tend to showcase these issues in a way that the earlier models just don't. The biggest issue potentially with a 35DE, and this is pretty uncommon, almost non-existent with the 30DE, but it's timing chain stretching and rattling as it gets closer to 200,000 miles. It's like I said, it's not common, but just to be safe, I would prefer to recommend cars with the 30DE. So taken at face value, this may be one of the best, if not the best car on this list. But the reason it's number 5 is because of its age. The cars that I'm recommending are from 96 to 2001, and that's pretty old at this point in the car world. So that means suspension, other wear items, I mean, really anything could be in need of replacement. Plus, it also means it's got 90s safety tech. So yeah, if you get a good one and things have been maintained, it could be terrific. And realistically, you can get one for under $3,000, which is crazy in this world. But you're still buying a 20-plus-year-old car, and you have to be aware of that. There are some downsides to it. There are even downsides to owning a 15-year-old car, which I'll talk about in another video. But that's why this is number 5.
Number 4 on our list is the first generation Ford Focus, sold from 2000 to 2007.
These cars can be had for almost nothing. You could probably find one for $2,500, maybe even $2,000, which we all know is just insane the way that the market has been. Now, Ford does have a certain reputation from this era, so that probably has something to do with the cheap prices. I won't really go into the weeds on this particular car because we have a Should I Buy coming out on it soon, but here's kind of the breakdown. This Focus was offered with a few 4-cylinder engine options. From 2000 to 2004, you could either get a 2-liter single overhead cam split port injection. That one's pretty easy to note. If you pop the hood, it literally says split port injection. But also during this period, you could get a 2-liter double overhead cam Z-Tech. From 2005 to 2007, you were either offered a 2-liter or 2.3-liter double overhead cam Duratec. Now, the split port motor had some issues with bad valve seats and thus doesn't come highly recommended by us. However, both the Z-Tech and Duratec motors are very reliable, with many reaching 200 to 250,000 miles. They aren't bulletproof, but if diligently cared for, they can be solid and even take a little bit of abuse. And the one that I've driven, the one that I'll drive in the next video, it was abused prior to its current owner. And it's hanging in there. It's rusty, but it's hanging in there. Now, the Z-Tech motor has a timing belt that, though non-interference, which basically means if it breaks, your engine doesn't become a boat anchor. So it can break. I wouldn't recommend it. Still change it. It needs to be changed every 60 to 80,000 miles. And realistically, every 100,000 is probably fine. Both Duratecs have timing chains, and they should last forever. These cars don't have any timing chain problems or tensioner problems like some German cars. Now, these cars aren't without problems, though. They do rust. They really rust. So if you're looking for one, please find one without rust. Unless you're keeping it for, only 1 or 2 years. And there really aren't any other known issues to be worried about. I mean, there are a few things. The cam seals can leak. The thermostats tend to go bad. And some people have reported bad wheel bearings, but these are all cheap fixes. They're really not. The cam seals are usually replaced with the timing belt. I did a thermostat. We'll do a DIY on the thermostat on these. I replaced one on the car I'll be driving next week. It wasn't hard. Are they bulletproof, reliable? No. But at current prices and the very low cost of these repairs, they end up being a reliable enough car to get you through a few years at minimal cost. But just like with the Infiniti, these are a little newer, but they are 20-year-old vehicles. And, if you get 05 to 07, you're doing a little bit better. They did receive a 4 out of 5 star rating from the NHTSA, but in terms of safety, they really can't hold a candle to something built in the last 5 to 8 years. But, that's part of what you have to deal with when you're looking for a car under $5,000 in this market. But for that price, they are very reliable and very cheap. And I think they'd be a decent first car.
So the third car on our list, or cars really, is the first and second generation Mazda 6 and the first generation Ford Fusion. I will say it is pretty hard to find a second generation Mazda 6 for less than $5,000, but they are out there. It's not impossible, but you're more likely to find a first gen anyway, and quite frankly, I think they look better.
Now, the first generation Mazda was sold from 2003 to 2007, and the second gen from 2008 to 2012. The first generation is pretty easy to find under $5,000, but like we said, the second gen's a bit more difficult, but they can be found. The first gen Fusion runs from 2006 to 2012, and they tend to be a bit cheaper than the Mazda. Not sure exactly why that is, maybe because Ford's reputation, who knows. We would say avoid 03 and 04 Mazdas and 06 Fusions. With the Fusion, it's just probably best to avoid the first model year, although nothing specifically goes wrong with them as far as we can tell. But with the 03 specifically on the Mazdas, they had a tendency to burn oil, and there were some rumors of transmission problems, but it was probably such a small percentage. Either way, it's best to avoid those early years. So why are these grouped together, you might ask? Well, during this time, Mazda and Ford were partnered, and the Mazda 6 and Fusion were essentially cousins. They shared powertrains, other components like brakes, and they rode on the same platform. Now, normally in this era, we would recommend the Mazda because the rest of the components being built by a competent Japanese manufacturer typically mean the car will be more durable. especially than a Ford of this era, but in this case, we've actually found that the first gen Fusion is absolutely fantastic, especially if you can find the 10 to 12. It's always a good sign when there are many for sale with nearly 200,000 miles as well. So as far as motors go, for the Mazda, you could get the 2-liter or 2.3-liter Duratec, which Mazda called the MZR LF and L3. They were really just Duratec motors. And you could get the 3-liter Duratec V6, which actually had 240 horsepower. It was pretty good. All of them very reliable, easy to work on. There is an MZR L8, which is a 1.8-liter motor, and though it's not terrible, it's the least reliable of the bunch, so we recommend staying away from it. The Fusion you could get with a 2.3 or 2.5 Duratec, or the same 3-liter Duratec V6. Now, from 10 to 12, which is the facelift, they offered the Duratec 35. Stay away from that one. That one has the water pump driven by the timing chain, and thus when the pump fails, it's stupid expensive. So, but you could also get the 3-liter on the 10 to 12, so it's not really a big deal. So in conclusion, these are a fair bit newer and were developed with input from Volvo, so they're very safe as well, which I think makes them a great choice if you're looking for kind of a mid-sized sedan, because most of the other cars on this list are pretty small, so if you're looking for something a little bigger, these are absolutely terrific.
Number 2 on our list is the 9th generation, or 2003 to 2008 Toyota Corolla.
So normally when people ask me, hey, what should I purchase, whether it be new or used, an answer I give often is Corolla or Camry, because these cars don't require a whole lot of work, and they can be abused and still run pretty reliably. So it's not a surprise that a Corolla ended up on this list. Now the one in question is the 9th generation from 2003 to 2008, and it has the 1ZZ FE 1.8-liter 4-cylinder. Now this motor isn't the most popular among Toyota enthusiasts due to its lack of power. It makes like 130 horsepower, 125 foot-pounds. It's pretty slow. My Miata makes more than that. It's also not suited to modification. That said, it's a very reliable motor and can last a long time even if you aren't a diligent car owner. I instantly recommend Toyota to people. Many cars can be reliable, but Toyotas just are. They don't really depend on a good owner. Now, Toyotas don't come without issues to be aware of. This era doesn't have any transmission issues or anything, but they do tend to develop some oil leaks. Now, 2 spots to watch out for: valve cover gaskets. A lot of cars have this. This one's super easy to replace. Realistically, should take like a half hour, even for someone who's not super experienced. The other is a timing chain tensioner leak. Now, this may sound horrifying and complex, and it would be on most cars, but because Toyota is Toyota, it's really not that bad. And it should only be about a 1 to 2 hour job for the average DIY mechanic. I'll link a step-by-step in the description. So this one's pretty perfect, and yeah, it is. This is the one I would recommend kind of off the bat to people. So why only second place? Well, it's hard to find cheap Toyotas, and though many of these are available for under $5,000, most of them will have higher mileage, be earlier in the generation, and it's not a huge issue, but $5,000 is a lot of money for a lot of people, and you still need to pay tax, registration, maybe a dock fee, and with every car you should have some money prepared just for the few odds and ends as you get it sorted. So if you can push your budget a little bit, this will probably be the best overall car on the list. Now, yeah, with the Fusion and the Mazda 6, you're also pushing your budget, but with those, when you get near that $5,000 mark, you're going to be getting a lower mileage than you will with the Toyota. So, it's kind of a give and take. It depends on what you're interested into. With the small car, this Corolla is probably the safest on the list. But at the same time, you are, like I said, you're going to be pushing that budget. But it's a Toyota, so you really can't go wrong.
And kind of a weird first pick for us, the surprising Hyundai Elantra, 4th generation from 2007 to 2010.
The 4th generation Elantra is kind of a weird pick. Hyundais and Kias were not quite what they are today during this period, especially in terms of quality, but this was the beginning of that era, I think. There are a few other great cars from this era, the Sonata and Santa Fe. My family actually owned both and still owns a Santa Fe with nearly 200,000 miles. Now, these Elantras aren't perfect. In 2010, they seemed to develop some transmission issues with the autos, but the other years are perfectly fine, and they seem to nearly be Corolla-level reliable. Kind of a surprise. People report reaching 200,000 miles very often, and you can find many for sale with 180,000 and up. They come with a very efficient 2-liter Beta 2 4-cylinder engine that's crazy easy to work on and super dependable. They did offer a manual, but I drove a 2008 with one, and it was horrible. But it did do its job, and it's probably not a bad car to learn stick on. So this car comes at the top of our list because it offers nearly Toyota-level reliability, pretty modern safety, and those safety and reliability are technically most important. I know that price is really the driving factor for people looking at this list. So this one comes in as the cheapest that is also 15 years old or newer and is reliable across the board, except for those 2010s. So, is it the car you really want? No, probably not, but if you need a safe, reliable, and modern car on a budget, then the 4th generation Hyundai Elantra is just about as good as it's gonna get. Honorable mention is the 7th generation Honda Accord, that's 2003 to 2007. We did make a should I buy on this if you want more details, but the only reason it doesn't make the list is because at this price range, you're really only getting 200,000 plus mile examples. And I just don't feel comfortable recommending that to somebody when there are these other cars out there. So it's a great car still, and if you're willing to put up with some high mileage quirks, then I think it's a great go. I mean, I have one. It's got 225,000 on it. So we also forgot to mention the 2008 to 2011 Ford Focus, the 2nd generation, which still has that very reliable 2-liter Duratec motor and can be had for $5,000 or under all day long.
Hey, thanks for watching. Be sure to check out our podcast on Spotify. It's AVE Automotive Podcast. And also check out our merch store on Etsy. We've got some mugs and some shirts. Everybody likes shirts. A mask, right in time for the mask mandate to be lifted. So thanks for watching.
I still feel comfortable telling you to buy a car with the 35DE if you have maybe a little bit bigger budget. Mudget. Okay, you got a $5,000 mudget. Nice.